Welcome to another episode of the GunBlog VarietyCast with your hosts, Sean Sorrentino and Aaron Paulette.
Welcome to episode 159 of GunBlog VarietyCast Radio, a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. How are you doing, Aaron?
I am surprisingly healthy considering that everyone else in the house is sick. Dad has pneumonia and Mom has the flu, so I'm living in a plague house. I am pretty much buying stock in hand sanitizer and vitamin C, doing my best not to get infected by anybody, because if I get sick, then, well, I mean, it's not like we're going to die, but nothing's going to get done. The poor dogs will be neglected, and it's just going to be awful.
Have you broken out the plastic wrap and the duct tape the inside of your door and are receiving your delivery pizza through your window?
Not yet.
It's the yet that gets me.
Well, you know, there are always layers to escalate, and right now, Mom and Dad are responding well to their medication. But if they don't, in potentially related news, just in terms of preps, I just bought a deer cart.
A deer cart?
Yes.
What, pray tell, is a deer cart?
Well, now you're a hunter, Sean. I thought you would know that.
No. I have gone out hunting. I have convinced one deer to walk in front of me and shot him for doing so. And I assisted in cleaning the deer after we toted it back to where we needed to clean it on the back of a golf cart. I have no idea what a deer cart is.
The deer cart is for people who don't have access to that sort of vehicle. And it's more or less an L-shaped frame with two big fat tires on it and a lifting capacity of about 500 pounds. So the idea is that you wheel it out into the woods with you, sort of like an oversized shopping cart. And then when you shoot the deer, you just have to haul the deer onto the cart and then lever it up and pull it back with you to where you decide to dress the deer. I know the next question here is, what am I going to use it for? Because I'm not a deer hunter.
Well, I would think that what you're going to do is when the sickness spreads and you are not affected by it, you're just going to wander randomly up and down your streets shouting, "Bring out your dead, ding, ding, bring out your dead, ding, ding," right?
Excellent classical reference.
Bring out your dead! Bring out your dead!
Not that exact application, but yes. Because if this thing will move a 500-pound deer, then I can easily load it up with my prepping supplies so that I don't have to carry them on my back, and I can push them on these nice wheeled tires rather than having to schlep them, causing physical exertion. Also, if I need to haul my family out, I mean, it's not really likely right now, but it's just that whole in case society collapses and I need to haul someone, instead of having to make this sort of makeshift litter or travois, I just sort of pad it up and boom, it is an improvised wheelchair cart thing. I can just think of a lot of uses for a metal cart with big tires that can haul up to 500 pounds. So I bought it, I assembled it. It folds up surprisingly flat once you get the tires off, and it is sitting next to my preps in my room.
Here's a plan, Aaron. If your parents get that sick, pick up your phone and dial 911 and let the big strong men with the big truck tote your parents wherever they need to go.
Well, yes, obviously. I'm just talking about in case you dial 911 and no one answers.
Well, then you've got bigger problems, Aaron.
Exactly.
I sometimes think that really you just want to collect stuff.
That is definitely a weakness I have. I am not going to lie. I like having things. I admit to being a geardo, but I do like things that have a practical application. It's not just, a tiny, precious little shiny that sits on a shelf and does nothing. I'm much more of the Batman/Iron Man sort of shiny. It's cool, but it also does this, that, and the other.
So speaking of which, recently you posted something on Facebook where you were talking about, oh, my bat belt has gotten too big. It is actually causing me physical pain to carry around all this stuff.
It's not quite that bad.
I am dying. My legs are about to break.
Now you're just making stuff up.
My hips are damaged beyond repair. So I guess this is what we get back into this deer cart, huh? You can just start toting that around behind you with all your EDC stuff.
I might get some odd looks. But hey, you're not going to run out of ammo that way, that's for certain.
So what was the final verdict on that? What is it you're going to do?
Well, the problem was that I was carrying 2 17-round mags on my weak side, and they were just rubbing and chafing my hip a little bit, and I was sore.
I have that problem too, but it has nothing to do with the magazines and more to do with the tactical muffin top.
So what I've done, just to temporarily address the problem, because, I'm not likely to be attacked while on the walk, I changed out the 17-round mags for the 10-round magazines that came with my Glock 26. And so just by reducing the weight on that side, it has reduced the chafing and discomfort. So that's the short-term solution. The long-term is to start looking at all the stuff I have and seeing what needs to be moved or removed or redistributed or whatever. And so that's a longer-term prospect. But right now, I think I have fixed the immediate ouchie problem.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah. So what's up with you?
Not really a whole lot. I did get notified today. It was kind of funny. I got an email. Hey, your new company car is at the car dealer. You're going to get your new car soon. And I'm like, yay, cool. So I called the dealer, because I can't just wait until he calls me and say, hey, it's ready. I call him and he's like, no, I don't know anything about it. Oh, well, all right. About 2 hours later. Hey, yeah, your car got here this morning. Okay, I guess they didn't tell you until just now. How is it I know more about your dealership than you do?
So what kind of car is it?
It's another Toyota Camry hybrid. It's what I have already. It's just the 2018 versus the 2016. The car's only 2 years old. I got 85,000 miles on it.
Wow, that's a lot for just 2 years of use.
Yep, that's what I do. I spend a lot of time driving and a little bit of time doing my actual job when I get there. That's why I listen to so many podcasts. And that's why I've been so, focused on having emergency gear in the car recently.
Well, yeah, especially if you spend a lot of time on the interstate, right?
Well, yeah, I drive all over the place. A lot of it is interstate miles, but where do most accidents happen, right? Intersections, stuff like that. I don't know what I'm going to face. So far, I've not had to deploy any of this safety gear. It's nice to have it, but, haven't had to deal with it yet. Thank goodness.
Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it.
Yeah, I'll feel like an idiot. I'm standing there, somebody's bleeding out, and I can't do anything about it.
Yeah, because it's all about you and not feeling like an idiot.
I won't feel like an idiot, and they won't be dead. It's a win-win. So speaking of not feeling like an idiot while somebody bleeds out and dies in front of you, would you like a cat tourniquet? All you have to do is join the GunBlog VarietyCast Radio Facebook group, which now has 75 members who are not on the podcast itself. It's 82 if you count the people on the podcast. 75 other members. That means if you join, you'll have a 1 in 76 chance of winning the cat tourniquet, because on October the 1st, I am going to randomly select one of the members of the GBVC Radio Facebook group, and I'm going to mail you a cat tourniquet, a belt carrier, and courtesy of Filster, I'm going to send you a Filster flat pack as well. So you'll be able to carry the cat tourniquet around with you, and if something unfortunate should happen on the road, you won't have to feel like an idiot while somebody bleeds to death. It's a win-win. I'll get you started with a cat tourniquet, join GBVC Radio group, and maybe you'll be the winner. Now, we've been talking about the GunBlog VarietyCast at the Range Complex on October 7th. Well, I'm not getting enough people who want to go, so I'm going to cancel that. We're not going to do that this year. I think what I'm going to end up doing is just take one of their open enrollment classes instead, because it's really time for me to get back to the range, and I would like to go back to the range, take a class with the new pistol. Every other class I've taken before, I've taken with the old 45 caliber XD. I really need to take one with this 9mm compact P320. So when's the last time you got to the range, Aaron?
Ooh, it has been too long. I'm not really sure. I want to say late spring or early summer.
Oh, dear, Aaron.
Yeah, I know. Well, look, it's Florida, it's hot, it's nasty.
Oh, yeah, like
And-
that's an excuse.
Yeah, well,
You're talking to the guys
I just
in North Carolina. It's not that much better.
I just don't like going out during the summer.
So are you doing dry fire or something?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have one of those laser light trainers and the target time, laser time, whatever that's called, the sensor unit that tells me where I hit and how many points I got and things like that. Yeah, I use that pretty much every day.
Oh, well, yesterday I got in the mail my own shot timer. So now I have a shot timer to practice with. Recently, I'd been doing the drills out of the Mike Seeklander competition handbook. And now I'm using Steve Anderson's first book, which has an actual name other than Steve Anderson's first book, but pretty much everybody knows it as Steve Anderson's first book. Even Steve Anderson knows it as Steve Anderson's first book, oddly enough. He calls his third book his thirdest book ever. Yeah, that's Steve for you. It's a funny podcast. You have to kind of be able to deal with Van Halen, but it's a good podcast. And I've done one day of the drills out of that book, like the first 6 of the first 12 drills. And wow, that shot timer really changes the deal. You know, the thing beeps and you've got to do something before it beeps again. There's a lot of pressure on you. At least we're both staying in practice. You need to get to the range, Aaron.
I absolutely do. I know. I'm just waiting for it to cool down some.
And I will be going to the range the next time on the second Saturday, which by the time you guys get this, it'll be the Saturday after you hear it. So the second Saturday in September at H2O Fowl Farms, and I'm going to be shooting the IDPA match that day. So maybe you'll see me. Come on, say hi.
Thanks to Lucky Gunner and Remington for their support of GunBlog VarietyCast Radio. From Golden Saber to range rounds, get a full lineup of quality Remington ammo that ships fast at LuckyGunner.com.
And I'm going to be shooting my Remington ammo from Lucky Gunner at this match. And a special note, we have outtakes this week. We've been having outtakes most weeks, but you got to check them out this week. They're pretty funny.
Beth taught a USCCA class in Connecticut this past weekend where apparently the state wants to make it as difficult as possible for people to get CCW permits or firearms with blocks at every turn. Where's reciprocity when you need it?
I recently got back from a trip to Connecticut in which I had a very unique and awesome experience and opportunity to offer the USCCA Concealed Carry and Personal Protection class, or basically the basic pistol class that would be necessary for Connecticut to be able to get their concealed carry permit. This was recently accepted by Connecticut as one of the options to be able to offer citizens opportunities for the training portion that was necessary to apply for their permit. And of course, I was really excited about this because my best friend of over 30 plus years lives in Connecticut, and I've been trying to come up with an excuse to get up there and offer some training. And when this all came to fruition, it just made sense for me to make a trip up and offer the class and hopefully offer the opportunity for several people to be able to move forward with their application for their permits. Little did I know how many difficulties I would run into. And honestly, all this really does is reinforce how important it is that we fight for national reciprocity. First and foremost, I can't carry a firearm in Connecticut because the state does not recognize my permit here in Alabama, nor does it recognize the one I obtained from Utah. So that was a little frustrating that I would have to go to a state and teach about what I'm very passionate about and not even have the opportunity or the chance to even bring my own concealed carry firearm with me. Along those lines, I wasn't able to bring any firearms with me. I was planning to bring several so that we could go through the shooting portion of the qualification, which would be 50 rounds minimum per person. And I thought it would be much easier if I brought several of my own personal firearms that I use for training with me. Unfortunately, we found that there are basically zero provisions anywhere that would enable me to do just that. So there was strike two against me, if you will. Number one, of course, no concealed carry firearm for me. And number two, no firearms for even teaching a class. And you would think with all the qualifications and certifications I've worked really hard to obtain that there would be some kind of allowance for me to be able to do so. But Connecticut has apparently tried to make it as difficult as possible for people to have guns. And I guess it doesn't matter what your training, what your background, what your experience level, they want you to jump through hoops and go through a process that is almost quite painful, especially compared to what I've been used to, what I'm accustomed to. Well, the next problem we ran into was actually getting folks to the range to shoot. None of the people in my class had a concealed carry permit, which means none of them could have a firearm, which also means none of them could legally shoot at the firing range. Now, this all seems like a catch-22 to me, no pun intended, but what happens is the folks that are interested in obtaining their permit and who are going through a class have to be there with a person who has a Connecticut concealed carry license. Well, there you go. I already said I don't have one, so that negated me, even as the instructor, from being qualified to basically sign off on each one of these students. I guess, I don't know if it's a waiver or some form that goes to the government, who knows. I guess that was strike 3. Well, there was also a strike 4. Not only was I not able to basically sign off on these students and shoot with these students or help them, one of the first ranges, local ranges that we contacted, basically told me that they didn't allow any outside instructors to their range. So, there you go. I couldn't carry my own gun. I couldn't bring firearms with me for training. I couldn't help any of my students with their shooting qualification because I didn't have a concealed carry permit from Connecticut. And I couldn't go to the local range because I was not one of their, I guess, approved instructors or one of their on-site instructors. Long story short, a really dear friend of mine from the Well-Armed Woman was able to help us out big time by filling in for me as the concealed carry permit holder from Connecticut and signing off for everyone's paperwork and being there at the range and basically finding the range for us in the first place. So what could have been quite the disaster turned out to be very successful with a great, enthusiastic, responsible new group of folks who are excited about their opportunity to apply for and obtain their permit to carry. Of course, who knows how long that's going to take. Once I look through actual step-by-step processes for those in Connecticut, I understand now why it's taken my best friend probably several attempts and many, many years to get to this point. She always had the best intentions and always wanted to get this done, but never was able to, I guess, follow the directions line by line, note for note. Hopefully this time, I guess fingers and eyes crossed, this time will be the answer to her problems and will get her to the right people at the right place at the right time so she will be able to legally carry a firearm for personal protection in her home state of Connecticut. All I can say is I'm kind of glad the whole ordeal is over, and again, all this did was reinforce how important I believe national reciprocity is. Not just for the instructors who are going around the nation helping other people in other states, but really, most importantly, just for us average everyday citizens who want to be able to protect ourselves no matter where in this great country we might be. Hopefully you're able to carry where you are, and until next time, stay safe and be well armed.
You can read more from Beth at usconcealedcarry.com/blog and click on Pacifiers and Peacemakers in the left sidebar.
This podcast runs on your donations. Go to GunBlog VarietyCast.com and click on the donate or subscribe button in the right sidebar. You can make a one-time donation of any amount or subscribe for as little as $2 a month. That doesn't sound like much, but we pay our server costs monthly. A little help from you is a big help to us.
Felons behaving badly. Wilson man admits to bank robbery killings. Now, some people have been asking, what is the point of this segment? Aaron, how many times have you heard that if we let regular people carry guns, they're going to snap and start committing crimes? You've heard that before, right?
Blood in the streets, shooting fights over parking spaces, OK Corral, Wild Wild West, dogs and cats living together.
The point of this is to point out to you the sort of people that are committing the crimes that we're all worried about. And I've got a great one for you today. Wilson man admits to bank robbery killings. Dateline, Conway, South Carolina. Court documents reveal suspect, the North Carolina man accused of having killed 2 women during a South Carolina bank robbery, admitted to the killings. In an affidavit in support of a criminal complaint, an FBI agent lays out how authorities believe the bank robbery happened and what he said after he was captured. This is bad English. What he said, it should be like what the suspect said, right?
Mm-hmm.
They need to hire you, Aaron. You always correct all of my written stuff. Suspect was then captured on surveillance entering Crestcom Bank located at 1230 16th Avenue in Conway.
Stop by and say hi.
According to the FBI. Bank video shows suspect approach a teller and speak with her briefly. Suspect then pulls a firearm and points it at the teller and shoots her multiple times, court documents state. Suspect then jumps over the teller counter. Suspect is also captured locating a second female employee of the bank who was hiding underneath a desk. Upon finding her, the video captured suspect shooting the employee multiple times as she attempts to hide under the desk. Bank audits show a loss amount of $15,294, documents state. Just 7 minutes after suspect is seen on bank surveillance video, he goes to the Conway Express Inn in one of the victim's cars. He can be seen leaving the driver's side door open, grabbing luggage from room 110, throwing it in the trunk of the car, and driving away, the affidavit describes. On Wednesday, suspect was spotted leaving a motel parking lot in Greenville, North Carolina. Officers responded to suspect's location, and suspect was taken into custody after a short chase, documents report. Suspect waived his rights and agreed to talk with investigators. Suspect confessed to the Crestcom bank robbery, court documents state. Suspect further admitted to shooting both bank employees during the course of the robbery. Suspect told agents that he was desperate, he needed money, and that he knew he was going to shoot someone. The FBI agent states in the affidavit the suspect said he knew he was going to hurt somebody that day. He admitted to authorities that he watched the movie Get Rich or Die Trying. He then told investigators he did not deserve to live, according to the documents. Suspect is also the suspect in a bank robbery in Wilson, North Carolina. Suspect was identified as the prime suspect in the robbery at BB&T Bank located on Tarboro Street in Wilson on August 11th. Just as an aside, Tarboro Street, Wilson is about 25 minutes from where I live.
So this guy says he didn't deserve to live, and yet here he is. I mean, okay, this is callous of me, but instead of shooting 2 people for $15,000, maybe he should have just shot himself.
Would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So what kind of a jewel is this person?
Well, let's look at his permanent record. Larceny, misdemeanor, class 1. Receiving stolen vehicle, felon, class I. Felony breaking and entering, felon, class H. Larceny of a motor vehicle, felon, class H. Larceny over 1,000, felon, class H. Receiving stolen goods, felon, class H. And habitual felon, felon, class C. What's very interesting about this is if I'm reading this correct, it looks like his probation ended 11 days prior to that BB&T bank robbery in Wilson.
11 days?
At least he waited until his probation was over to start getting caught robbing banks again. We don't know if he's a suspect in any other bank robberies or he committed any other bank robberies. Did he wait until his probation was over, then wait another few days, a couple, 2 weeks, and then rob the bank in Wilson and then move on later? That was August 11th. And then immediately goes on down to South Carolina and kills 2 people in a bank robbery. So it's not you, it's not me, it's not Aaron, it's not honest concealed handgun permit holders. It's criminals committing crime. Baron is on assignment and will return soon.
You're going to hear us talk about this in the show for the next couple months. We're taking a survey of our listeners, and we'd like you to participate. It will help us learn more about you, no matter how long you've been a listener or how frequently you listen to this show. So please take a few minutes and visit our website at GunBlogVarietyCast.com. You'll find the listener survey link at the top of the right sidebar. It's also in the show notes right at the top, and you can complete the survey anonymously. Thanks.
When a loved one needs to be taken to the ER, do you know their most important medical details? Stuff that will be needed right this moment? Miguel has some suggestions for us.
Hello everybody. If I sound like crap, it's down the microphone that Sean hates so much, but it's because I actually am feeling like crap. I was at the hospital and guess what? Sick people go there and have no problem sharing their crud with you. So I brought one home. This segment will be short and I apologize. I know I don't do prepping. We have much more capable hands in the little corner of the podcast world, but I feel I can add my measly 2 pesos to the equation. I just spent 2 days at the hospital via the ER. Not for me, but for a family member, specifically my mom. Without going into details, they began as a, I'm not feeling good, let's go to the doctor kind of thing, and then started to roll. My mother has a long history of illness, and I have been sort of her walking medical file since I was 10. More than one doctor has gotten upset when I told them straight up that I knew more about my mother's overall condition than they could ever do with a 15-minute office visit. So when we got to the ER and they started to build up her chart, the attendees were having fun, having almost all their questions answered immediately. Apparently, it is some sort of feat that you can recall not only all the meds and the respective dosage, but even type and date of the surgeries done, plus other ailments that have not been an issue for over 20 years. Allergies? Yep. Although I did forget that she does not digest aspirin well. Now, I'm blessed with a decent memory, and good part of it has been dedicated to the record of my mom's medical stuff. My question is, do you know the important medical specifics of your family members? I know blood type and allergies are the common ones, but past surgeries is something the hospital needs to know, especially if your loved one has had any organs worked on or removed. The internal landscape changes and doctors are trying to figure out why it ain't looking like it's supposed to be, and if that shadow that shouldn't be there could be some sort of malignant growth. Yes, it happened once long ago and it scared the out of everybody, plus delayed treatment. What should you do? First thing is to sit down and write the medical history of everybody in your family. Call doctors and see how can you get at least the basics of all the procedures and diagnoses you and your family members had through the years. It does not need to be a very detailed description, but at least get what and when it was done. Record keeping, memorize important stuff. Allergies, diabetes, hemophilia, any recurrent illness. What medications are currently being taken. One thing they kept beating on me, any kind of blood thinners, including aspirin. Because if it's a surgery, they need to know that kind of stuff. If you can also memorize the dosage, you'll be placed in the pantheon by the hospital. Memorize the name of your primary care doctor, phone number, or have it really, really, really at hand. And any specialist that, is being visited regularly. But wait, Miguel, you really want us to memorize that stuff? That is so lame. I don't have the time to shut the hell up and do it. The important info you won't remember because you don't have the time is the info that will keep somebody alive. And you will not be able to provide it because you were too lazy. Now, if the lack of info kills you, don't sweat. You pay your money, you take your chances. But you better be prepared to deal with your conscience if a loved one dies because you were a lazy. Record keeping. We live in an age of wonderful electronics. That being said, you should be careful where you keep important, detailed medical information. I cannot give you advice on that, and since I'm not an expert or even know the basics, I would not offer but to keep it written down with you or on something you carry with you every day. Major hospitals nowadays not only work 24 hours, but are interconnected with others, and your records will pop up on request. But also, I cannot vouch for their safety. You have to balance the need to know in an urgent situation with the safety of your data. So, you should research what to do, what you can use. See? Another chore to do. One thing I keep with me at all times is a bound notebook and a pen. I know, it's very old school, but basically, it does not run out of batteries. I mentioned the notebook because one of the things that I did in the hospital was to make notes of everything that was being done to Mom. Tests, meds given, blood pressure, temperature, etc. The hospital had this little amazing rolling contraption. It had a computer and the monitors and the blood pressure, thermometer, etc. But, usually the failure will come from the human interface side. More than once I was able to provide certain info faster than the nurse or physician assistant could get by scrolling in the screen. It also sends the message that you're keeping track of all they do, and they tend to be extra careful. And my particular advantage is that I write faster than thumbing information in the smartphone. I got sausages for thumbs. Okay guys, I'm done. Seriously, sorry. I need to get my ugly rest. And, my apologies for the rambling. Blame the evil crud I picked up. You take care of yourself and your families, get your info together, and at the same time pray you will never have to use it. See you next week.
Get more Miguel daily at gunfreezone.net.
Hey gang, this is Masad Ayub from the Pro Arms Podcast. I'm here to remind you that our podcast is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network, and I'm going to suggest you do what we do and check out the other podcasts at selfdefenseradio.net.
The main topic, enjoy your protests. It's going to get awkward soon. So Aaron, did you hear that Nancy Pelosi finally condemned Antifa violence in Berkeley?
I did, and the first thing I did upon hearing that was check what color the Bay Bridge was in this reality, because I was sure that I had slipped into an alternate dimension.
I will admit I did go outside to make sure that the sky was still blue and hadn't turned pink overnight.
And it's not just that she condemned it, but she had some pretty strong language for it. There's a link in the show notes, and she has a written statement that's about 2 paragraphs, but it's really only the first paragraph that is noteworthy. It says, "Our democracy has no room for inciting violence or endangering the public, no matter the ideology of those who commit such acts. The violent actions of people calling themselves Antifa in Berkeley this weekend deserve unequivocal condemnation, and the perpetrators should be arrested and prosecuted."
So what do you think happened, Aaron?
Well, unfortunately, this is causing me to be very cynical, and I don't like being cynical. I would like to say that Pelosi looked at what happened in Berkeley, at how innocent protesters were beaten and robbed, and how the other I don't even know if you can call them protesters, but the ones who were demonstrating for Trump, the others had to be escorted to safety by the police. And so she looked at it and said, violence against peaceful, nonviolent demonstrators is just not cool. And so she denounced it.
Of course, that's exactly what happened. She looked at something, she recognized that it was bad, and she said, that is bad. You should not do that, right?
That's what I sincerely hope. But I have this nagging suspicion that what's happened is that someone has been looking at how Antifa has been polling, and they've been watching this for months, maybe even since the other Berkeley riot for when Milo went to speak. And they've said, you know, guys, this Antifa thing, this is electoral poison. We need to distance ourselves from it right now, or we're going to be handing Trump the presidency in 2020.
Oh, I think it's far worse than handing Trump the presidency. I think what they're really concerned with is the Senate.
Oh, and the 2018 elections.
Exactly. That's the first thing that's coming up is the 2018 elections. And in the 2018 elections, it's not a great map for the Democrats. I have this very interesting, I guess that's the best way to put it, interesting blog post, I think it is. I'm not entirely certain what this is, if it's a newspaper or a blog post, called Philadelinquency. He starts off with, or whoever it is, starts off with, I feel sorry for leftists. Skip a couple of paragraphs and it says, the people I'm feeling sorry for are you guys, gals, and other who've been out marching in circles around City Hall hoping Trump would give a shit about your magic marker signs. Standing next to you in those crowds were miscreant humanities students and flunkies, otherwise known as Antifa and Black Bloc. Unfortunately for you, even though you didn't don Antifa garb, you're going to be lumped in with them, because you've been winking and nodding at them and quietly accepting the normalization of extrajudicial, unconstitutional violence as if it were protected speech. There's a lot in this article, but 2 things really jump out at you. Number 1, the person is saying, hey, look, they're already getting their ducks in a row to have a united front against this Antifa violence. He's got a picture of Vox. They have no allegiance to liberal democracy, an expert on Antifa explains the group. David Weigel from Washington Post, the Black Bloc is a menace, taking advantage of peaceful rallies to hurt people and socialize the blame. David Axelrod, nothing could please neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and their enablers more than these knuckleheads attacking them. And even the Onion's kind of jumping on him. Antifa organizers announce plans to disrupt neo-Nazi rally or whatever else going on that day. It actually sounds more like a plan than the Onion, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed. I think in 2015, with the lead up to the election, it became increasingly difficult to determine whether an article was from The Onion or not.
I know.
And so when Onion satire articles are starting to sound like legitimate news, there's a problem somewhere.
Yeah. Now, the second part that really jumps out at you, there's a segment called The Great Disavowal Has Arrived. You see, there are quite a number of Democratic senators in Congress who are up for re-election next year. Our very own U.S. Senator Bob Casey, guy's from Philadelphia, so we're talking the Pennsylvania senator, is considered vulnerable, being located in a state that voted for President Trump. One of the most vulnerable Democratic senators in Congress is Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill. Her state voted for Donald Trump by 57% to Hillary Clinton's 38%. If you take a look at the senators that are up for re-election, there's quite a few of them that are in Donald Trump voting states. Some of them in very heavily voted for Donald Trump states. So what does that tell them? They have to face the same election, basically a statewide election that the president went. So that's the numbers they got to look for. They're not looking for like just their district like the representatives do. They have to look at the whole state. And it's really difficult to gerrymander an entire state. So they're looking, oh my goodness, we have to fight uphill to win this. And we got a bunch of idiots out in the street beating people up who claim to be on our side. So, it might be fun to say, well, I hope the Nazis get beat down. And quite frankly, Nazis getting beat down, really not a problem. Except they have to actually be Nazis, right? They have to be doing Nazi things and marching around in the street and saying stupid things. You kind of got to let them do it. That's what the law says. So when the Antifa guys and whatever else people show up, go down and beat up people for running their mouths, that doesn't poll well. And I think it's very interesting what he says. It's very obvious what next year will be like. The worst footage from protest demonstrations will be put on display in campaign advertising, and all the claims that Democratic pundits and authors have made claiming America is festooned with 64 million gas chamber murdering Nazis. Everyone who voted for Donald Trump is a Nazi. They're all Nazis. Every fucking last one of them is a fucking Nazi. And how hard is it going to be, do you think, Aaron, to find quotes that say exactly those things?
Well, I don't think it'll be difficult at all.
Yeah, I pretty much have seen that all over Facebook. I've seen people linking that off of people who've said that on Twitter. I've seen people who are actually not just random Joe Schmo saying stuff like that, but people who actually have a name and position saying things like that. How is it going to be possible for people who have said and done things like that to make the case that they should be in charge instead?
Yeah, that's a problem I'm glad I don't have.
So basically the whole point of the article, and I encourage you to read the entire thing. It's a very well written, very interesting article from the left to the left. I've got a link in the show notes for you. The entire article's point basically is, Cindy Sheehan, you were great attacking Bush, but now that our president is president, you need to shut up about this peace thing. We're going to ignore you. We're going to marginalize you. We're not going to talk to you. We don't want to hear anything about you. It's the same thing in reverse. They thought they had some useful Cindy Sheehan, but they found out the only thing that these Black Bloc and these Antifa guys are doing is splattering all over their own side. Because Americans don't go down for that. You don't go out in the street and beat people up. It's just not cool.
And then the article ends with this quote. But that's okay. Democrats' prospects are not that great next year. November 2018 won't be long away. The second those returns come in, you can put the masks back on and go marching again, comrade. End quote. Either the article writer is saying, stop what you're doing long enough for the elections to happen, and then you can go back to doing what you want to do, or he's admitting that things aren't going to change permanently. The disavowal will last only as long as is necessary for the election, and then once the elections have happened, they're safe for another 2 years, so you can go back to doing what you're doing. You can go back to not helping.
And I think that is not an or, that's an and. I think the person is saying both of those things, to be honest. Cynical, very cynical. It's not that you need to stop doing this because it's a bad thing. You need to stop doing these bad things because those bad things are hurting us. So wait until it doesn't hurt us anymore. Then just go back to doing those bad things. Because, whatever.
Of course, the picture of a very gay-looking Stalin at the end of the article really just sets it off.
Yeah. But I highly recommend that you read this article. It's a great article. There's a couple other links in the show notes about Pelosi. There's a few other places that are disavowing this stuff. But I think that you should consider that the only thing they really care about is not wrecking their electoral chances. It's not that they actually think it's wrong. They just think it's tactically and strategically unsound because it will cause them to lose the election, which is all they really care about.
I don't have a very high opinion of humanity to begin with, and this is just making it worse, and I really don't want to be pessimistic. Speaking for me personally, if we could continue disavowing Antifa after the 2018 elections, that would really be great for my estimation of the human race. Thanks.
Yeah.
Tiffany's on assignment and will return soon.
Cerakote is a polymer ceramic composite coating that can be applied to metals, plastics, polymers, and wood. It's also what will take your plain Jane firearm from basic to full custom. Whether you want a handgun coated in just a single color, your hunting rifle camouflaged for your specific environment, or your competition pistol sprayed in purple, white, and black Carolina Cryptic, you want Carolina ceramic coating to do the job. Bud and his team of skilled technicians will carefully disassemble and clean your firearm, professionally apply the Cerakote in your choice of colors and patterns, and return your firearm to you in perfect working order. And they also do auto engine parts. When I wanted my competition handgun Cerakoted, I trusted Carolina Ceramic Coating, and you should too. Check out their work on Instagram. Search at CerakoteNC, that's at CERAKOTENC, or go to CarolinaCeramicCoating.com. And now it's time for Blue Collar Prepping with that bratty kid sister of the gun blogosphere, Erin Paulette.
Come on, every pony! It's time for Blue Collar Prepping with Erin Paulette!
Back in episode 51, when Tampa was flooded, I discussed what to do if your car was caught in floodwaters. Given the situation in Houston, it seems timely and relevant to discuss what to do if your home is flooded. The most important piece of advice I can give you is something that I've echoed many times before. If you know a disaster is coming and you have the ability to get out, do so. I know that the mayor of Houston told people not to evacuate, and I can sort of see his reasoning for it. The Houston interstate system is also its flood control system, with the water designed to follow the roads until it lets out into the Gulf. And the last time Houstonians evacuated, which was in 2005 for Hurricane Rita, the roads quickly became jammed because Houston is the fourth largest city in America. A combination of gridlock and a heat wave resulted in up to 118 deaths before the storm even arrived, as opposed to only 113 deaths caused by Rita itself. So, from a logistical point of view, I can see why Mayor Turner didn't demand mandatory evacuation. But the key word there is demand. Just because you don't have to go doesn't mean you shouldn't go. From my point of view, evacuation not being mandatory just means I have an easier time getting out of town. But let's say you've decided not to evacuate for whatever reason. You've stockpiled food, water, batteries, and medical supplies, and your house made it through the storm in one piece. But now you have to deal with flooding. Ideally, you live on high ground, which means your house isn't flooded. But even if that's the case, you are likely without power and running water, and you may need to leave your house to get supplies. If you aren't on high ground, you definitely need to move so that you can get to a warm, dry place to sleep, because floodwaters cause hypothermia, structural damage to houses, and bring disease with them. Your three biggest needs are waterproofing your preps, communication, and transport. Waterproofing is a subject that I discussed in its own segment in episode 29. I won't repeat all of that here. Just add that if you're going to go to the trouble of making preps, you need to keep them dry and keep them from floating away. Having food in a waterproof box does you no good if that box is floated off in the floodwaters. So lash your preps to something strong. And I mean strong. 2 feet of water can pick up and move trucks. So I don't think that lashing your boxes to a 100-pound shelf is going to do you any good. I mean strong as in a structural support or part of the foundation. Where you put your preps is also a bit of a gamble. You don't want them on the ground floor if you're expecting floods, so many preppers store theirs in the attic, which is great, except for the fact that hurricane-force winds have a distressing tendency to peel roofs off. The best advice I can give is to keep your preps with you wherever you shelter, so keep them portable and have a variety of places where you can secure them. Make sure that they're visible with bright colors on the lids and sides so that you can find them if they are covered by dark water. Communication sounds difficult because the best kind in a situation like this is a ham radio. Most people think this requires a lot of expensive gear and a large antenna, but they're wrong. For the low price of around $25, you can get a Baofeng UV5RA, a handheld ham radio that looks like a thick walkie-talkie. This means that they're not only portable, but also that they can be kept in waterproof containers until needed. Best of all, not only can the Baofeng listen to FM and weather bands, but there are also local repeaters nearly everywhere. You can set your radio up to link into these repeaters, and the repeaters then send your signal out at a significantly stronger and more efficient range. This means that this inexpensive handheld radio can communicate up to several hundred miles if you can get into a linked repeater system. The drawback to this is that you need a ham license in order to broadcast on it. But from my point of view, if it's a survival situation, use what you have to call for help. And, to paraphrase Ellen Ripley from Aliens, the FCC can bill me later. Transportation is where it gets expensive because I've been told that the owner's definition of a boat is a hole in the water into which you throw money. But if you have a fishing boat, a flat-bottom utility boat, or even a rowboat, you're doing well, assuming, of course, it didn't get floated away. If you don't own a boat, the cheapest option would be to buy an inflatable raft of some kind and store it along with your preps. Right now, the best kind that I can find is an Intex Excursion 5-person inflatable raft with oars for $115 on eBay. If you go this route, make sure you have the following accessories with it: a tow line to secure it, life vests for everyone who will use it, including pets, extra oars. If you have 5 people, then 4 should be paddling and 1 should be steering. Repair kits, in case debris in the water pokes a hole in the raft. And some way to get it and yourself out of the attic, such as a fire axe, if that's where you keep the raft. A raised inflatable mattress, like the kind you get from Serta, can also serve as a makeshift cargo barge. The twin version is rated to support 250 pounds or more, and the queen size ought to be at least double that. A cargo net, or one made from paracord, would not only secure what's on it, but also give you tie-downs for towing and securing it. Check out the video for that in the show notes. Stay strong and stay dry, Texas.
Former Bloomberg lickspittle Mark Glaze goes out on his own, and now he's out for blood. Weird looks at Glaze's talking points through the ages in This Week in Anti-Gun Nuttery.
So recently, the NRA-ILA published an article titled "Former Bloomberg Lackey Comes Clean on the True Anti-Gun Agenda." The lackey in question is former head of Mayors Against Illegal Guns and current consultant for anti-gun group Guns Down, Mark Glaze. The agenda is indeed banning and confiscating lawfully held guns. The article is in the show notes. But like most anti-gun spokesflacks, Glaze is a tough guy to pin down. So today's Audio Fist goes through the ages looking at the lies of Mark Glaze. Our first series of clips comes from several interviews he did for NPR back in 2013, back when Bloomberg's Mayors Against Illegal Guns was still a thing, and Glaze was running it.
It's the NRA that for 50 years has been systematically whittling away at even common sense regulations so that now they are able to make the argument. There's so many guns in circulation, laws only affect the law-abiding, criminals will always find them. They need to take some responsibility.
First up, I chose to lead with this clip because his use of common sense in terms of the anti-gun agenda. Of course, everything he said was all lies. The anti-gun side has been about banning and restricting guns, often under false agendas such as safety, for generations. The NRA has been rolling back those restrictions for several decades now. As for the number of guns in circulation, there was a time when every house in America had guns. And there was a time when it was legally required. Oh, and crime was lower before the anti-gunners started their disarmament push. How low? About as low as it is now. That low.
Country is much more educated and cares much more about the issue than it did before, according to some polls.
I agree. Wait, where is he going with this?
You ask people about gun control, they sort of don't know what it means. They're half for it, they're half against it. What none of them are really for, a very small percentage, is weakening the gun laws, which is what the gun lobby has been doing systematically.
No. When people hear gun control, they know it's a fool's errand, an agenda that will strip law-abiding people of their property. This is why no anti-gun group calls themselves that. Mayors Against Illegal Guns became every town for gun safety. And gun violence prevention has become the chic euphemism for gun control. So the idea that the American people as a whole support the anti-gun agenda is nothing but pure fantasy.
When there's nobody on the other side issuing letter grades, talking to the public and making sure they're heard, and providing some political support, the decision not to vote for the 90% of Americans who want background checks, for example, became very easy to do. And that's what our mayors hope to change.
This is really cute, as Mayors Against Illegal Guns was transformed into Every Town and Moms Demand Action before this grading system could be implemented. I think Bloomberg realized it would have been a disaster, as the Bloomberg name is as politically poisonous as the term gun control. And again, we have the 90% myth. Nope. Universal background checks are mildly popular in anti-gun blue states and wildly unpopular everywhere else. Heck, they tried to pull this crap against U.S. Senator Mark Pryor, a Democrat I might add. The Second Amendment is no longer a partisan issue, thankfully. And Pryor called them out on it.
He says, I don't take gun advice from the mayor of New York City, meaning Michael Bloomberg.
Yes.
I listen to Arkansans.
Well, he should. He should. And the point of the ad that we ran against him was that 84% of Arkansans think that every gun buyer should get a criminal background check.
You might think it took a lot of courage to stand up to the deep pockets of Michael Bloomberg, but that should tell you the depths of middle America's dislike for gun control, especially gun control paid for by the billionaire mayor of New York City.
New York City!
Mark Pryor did end up losing this election to Senator Tom Cotton. Of course, Cotton holds an A rating with the NRA opposed to Pryor's D. So the people of Arkansas seem to have spoken on guns. And have for generations. Even Bill Clinton was pro-gun when he still lived there.
Can't remember an issue that had 90% of the public support that didn't eventually become law, or some politicians lost their jobs over it.
90%. Yeah, they have their favorite lies, don't they?
We passed universal background check bills in, a handful of states, 5 or 6, that were not moving in anything like that direction.
No. You got a few blue states, some of them formerly purple states, to pass them by narrow margins.
Today, licensed gun dealers have to give background checks to their buyers, but everybody else does not. And right now, everybody else are sales that take place by unlicensed sellers to private individuals online, at gun shows and classified ads. And it accounts for the vast bulk of unlicensed sales in this country, we think, and it's a huge loophole that criminals who are sophisticated know how to exploit.
Unlicensed sales are just private people buying, selling, and trading their lawfully held property. And of course, unlicensed sales are the bulk of unlicensed sales in this country. Can you believe the level of doublespeak this goon is engaging in? And no, criminals are not buying guns at gun shows or online forums. They get them from family or friends, either through illegal transfers, black market sales, or straw buys. All more serious crimes than, say, violating Colorado's background check law.
Once you require a background check at a licensed dealer, you got to look for somewhere else. So they migrate today to the private sale loophole, which is a website where private sellers congregate, a gun show where unlicensed sellers can congregate. Once you close that off, you really have to turn to the black market. And the truth about the black market is that it's not that easy to access, even for sophisticated criminals.
All lies. Again, they steal their guns, or they borrow or buy them from family or friends or criminal associates, all who know better, or they engage in illegal straw buys. And all of these are vastly easier than going to a gun show or arranging a private sale online. Do you know how many of those guys on gun boards and gun shows are off-duty cops?
More people will need to go to the black market, and maybe the black market will respond by expanding, and then it becomes law enforcement's job to continue kind of drawing the noose around those criminals and diminishing the pool of guns that are available in that market.
So his little fantasy all boils down to cops having to enforce the laws that are already on the books. Also known as the pro-gun side's #1 solution to reducing gun violence.
In just the few months that the Colorado bill has been in place, dozens of prohibited gun purchasers, people who under current law are so dangerous they're not allowed to have a gun, have been stopped, who would have gotten those guns before.
Except we know that the bulk of background check denials are false positives. The bulk of those dozens of denials are likely people who weren't dangerous and eventually got their guns. And out of a few dozen, we're really talking effectively 0 people, which is coincidentally the same number of people charged with violating Colorado's stupid background check law.
People will continue buying guns at just as rapid a pace as they've been doing for the past 4 or 5 years. And the sky won't fall, but Colorado will be a lot safer, and that success will pay dividends across the nation.
And now, 4 years later, Colorado's violent crime rate has gone up, while crime in places without such laws has gone down. Oops. Now on to a recent interview with Glaze on the Tucker Carlson show, where now, free from Michael Bloomberg, he can be a little more honest.
Mark, the point was to make Seattle a safer town, but the murder rate doubled. So isn't this a demonstrable failure?
Well, in point of fact, I think the reason that they passed this gun tax was to try and raise some money so that they could study gun violence, which I think is a good thing to do.
Seattle, like Colorado, is also getting more dangerous while most of the nation is getting safer. Notice how Mark doesn't sound surprised.
What they, I think, were responding to is the fact that the gun lobby has made it impossible for the federal government to study gun violence. They basically banned the use of federal dollars for that purpose. So they were trying to raise some money to study things that might work, and I hope they use the money for that purpose.
Again, there isn't a ban on federal grant money to study gun violence, just a ban on CDC funds to use for anti-gun advocacy, because neither guns nor violence are an infectious disease, and because the feds have no business advocating for the infringement of a civil right. Oh, and the Seattle gun tax was never intended either to raise money or lower violent crime. It was to drive out the few gun stores left in the city, and it did. So therefore, it didn't generate much money at all.
In gun violence, most often, the guns that gang members use are semi-automatics with high-capacity magazines, which, by the way, is the same gun that was used to almost assassinate Steve Scalise.
Tucker correctly responds that long guns of any kind are rarely used in crime, and Glaze admits that he's indeed correct, but then doubles down saying that gangs use semi-auto rifles as a choice arm. Yeah, except gang violence is gun crime in the United States. So he lied and admitted he was lying.
In theory, we ought to be able to have as many guns as we want in this country, but we basically run a pilot project on that proposition, and it has failed catastrophically, which means I think you're absolutely right. Unless we have dramatically fewer guns and we make them dramatically harder to get, it's impossible to craft laws that are going to stop all of the bad guys but let the good guys do what they want.
Failed catastrophically by having violent crime going down to the levels when people were stopping by the malt shop on their way to the sock hop in their Hudson sedan. But now we have some honesty. He wants to reduce the number of guns in America. How does he want to do this?
An organization I work with called Guns Down did a poll, and they actually asked how many likely voters and how many gun owners would support a program where you were required to turn in your assault rifle to the government if the government would buy it back. It had over 65% support, including among gun owners.
Said after praising Australia for their massive gun confiscation laws. Say what they may about nobody's coming for your guns. They are coming for your guns. Just they know you won't like it. That's why they resort to bad faith arguments.
In addition to appearing here, Weird is a regular host on The Squirrel Report and blogs at weirdworld.com. That's WEERD world.com.
Plug of the week, the Tides of History podcast. So I got an email sometime earlier this week. Hey, we'd be interested in purchasing some advertising on your podcast. We want to advertise the Tides of History podcast. I said, well, if somebody wants to advertise on the podcast, I'm all ears, number one. And number two, I'm not advertising anybody on the podcast if I don't know anything about it. Make sense?
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to endorse crap.
Exactly. So what I did was I looked up the Tides of History podcast, which is available pretty much anywhere. And I saw there were only 5 episodes. The first 2 episodes were like, the first one was like, this is coming up. The second one is, this is what the podcast is about. Then there were 2 that were like, this is what he's going to talk about. It's about 40 minutes long a piece, plus some stuff at the end. And then a 5th that was an interview. I listened to all of them and I thought they were great. Now, I won't be taking advertising for the podcast. The way that they run their advertising just simply doesn't fit our model at all. But I did like the podcast, and I thought, well, it's good. Maybe it would be something that I could tell you guys about. I'm not really sure. So I put it out on the GunBlog VarietyCast radio podcast group on Facebook, which you should join. And I asked people, hey, give this a listen. Tell me what you think. I got some feedback. Pretty much the feedback was good, but I couldn't figure out what exactly I'm going to say about this podcast. Well, friend of the show, Kay, responded. After listening to episodes 2, 3, 4, and 5, here's my worthless 2 cents. It's good. I feel like I'm listening to a made-for-high school movie, just can't see the video. I'm an avid listener of the Hardcore History podcast and tried like hell not to compare the two. The production is well done, and the narrator has a voice for radio. All in all, it has most elements people are looking for in a, quote, history podcast without going 6 hours long. LOL. Hope this helps somewhat. Needless to say, I will be keeping my subscription for the time being, because it's catchy. I thought, you know what? I can't do any better than that, so I'm just going to read Kay's review. So check it out, Tides of History podcast. It's a Wondery podcast. That's apparently a network of podcasters, the Wondery podcast people. But check it out. You'll find it on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, that sort of thing. And like I said, join GBVC Radio Group on Facebook. There's currently 75 members. I'm going to be giving away a tourniquet, a carrier, and a flat pack for it on October 1. Well, that's our show for the week. Remember that GunBlog VarietyCast Radio is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.
Find the show notes at gunblogvarietycast.com/episode 159.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the GunBlog VarietyCast. Music courtesy of Rob Allen at blog.roballen.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play Music. This podcast is made possible by the Firearms Policy Coalition and by contributions from listeners like you.
So apparently in the state of Florida, it's not a crime to shoot the lawnmower guy when he's about to up your recording. Son of a... Damn, my level's low. Wait a minute. Okay. Let me see. Hello. Hi, people. How are you? Yeah, much better, I think. Okay, hold on. Pause this crap. Oh, cool. The son of a... Turn off the damn thing. Record keeping? I'm gonna shoot the son of a... What caliber for lawnmower? Swear to God. Pause. Is the leaf blower. If you're aiming for the leaf blower, shotgun number 6 pellets. Oh, he's gone. Okay. No, he's back. Okay, he's going away. And that is done. That wasn't so bad. Yeah. By now, Sean is saying, you motherfucker, this sounds like crap and how to edit it. This is my evil laughter.
This is a URS production.